Hi, Jerry Matthews from the Book Boss crew here. I just wanted to touch on what it is to be an honorable researcher. Now, to my way of thinking, this is somebody who will take responsibility for his actions and accept the consequences by openly owning up to his errors and mistakes. People take an honorable man's word as the truth because they know he won't lie for personal gain and will remain objectively fair even if it means taking a loss. But honesty doesn't end with telling the truth. He also has to hold integrity inside. Now, personal integrity is defined as having strong morals or values and expressing those principles with both one's word and actions. The concept of having integrity is really quite simple. It means you will uphold your values no matter the situation or who's watching. Now, to give you a good example, I know just such a man. He's a young and honest broker of the truth when it comes to Sasquatch research. Coming in at podcast number 5 of the Summer Sizzler series, the Book Boss crew in conversation with none other than our friend, the tall one, Mr. Brent Dill. Enjoy. Hi, listeners. We got a great show for you today, for certain. I've been trying to get this guy on for some time now, and we're finally, karma has come together to allow it to happen. And I'm Jerry Matthews, by the way, and my co-host are Bill Reed. How you doing, Bill?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Not too bad at all. And the inestimable, if there's such a word, Thomas Steenberg. Hello, Thomas.
Hello, Jerry. How are you today?
Doing really good, It's by way of introduction, all I can say is that, there are all kinds of people drawn to the Sasquatch world. There are those who are fans of the monster in the woods. There are those who are in it because it gives them a sense of importance when they can tell some tall tales on the internet and gain thousands of followers overnight practically. And then there's those who are in it for the money. There are those who are in it just to prove to themselves that the creature exists. No other reason, just to prove it to themselves. And lastly, there are those who are in it just to solve the mystery, whatever the outcome may be, one way or the other. And to me, those are the truth seekers, whether they are researchers, investigators, or enthusiasts, or all of the above. They all have the same need to settle the mystery and to carry out those investigations in an honest manner. One such person is a researcher from the state of Washington by the name of Brent Dill. You can find Brent at his YouTube channel, The Tall Ones. And today you can find him right here. The Book Boss crew are pleased to welcome, drop the mic, Mr. Brent Dill. How you doing, Brent?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Before we get into this, I just want to give a shout out to a dear friend of ours, Mr. Leon Thompson, Leon from Bigfoot Okanagan, of course, and from the Book Boss crew. Leon, I hope you're well enough to be able to take a gander at this video and the other ones very soon, my friend. We're all thinking about you. And for those of you who are out of the know, Leon is in hospital. He has been for some weeks now with relatively serious ailments. And we're wishing him the best. And he has a lot of friends on the internet, and they're all pulling for him 120%. Definitely. So you guys would like to say hello to Leon before we start the show? I'm sure he'd appreciate it.
Hey, Leon, man, we miss and love you, man. We miss and love you, man. We can't wait for you to get healthy and get well enough to come say hi to us. And so you're definitely in our thoughts every single day.
Leon, the chair is sitting beside us, waiting for you to join back up. Miss you, brother, and all the best, and can't wait to talk to you again.
Leon, I'm thinking of you continuously, and I know, man, you got what it takes to get through this.
So we're rooting for you, my friend. We're all rooting for you, very much so. You've made a huge impression on the internet with regards to Sasquatch research. You've made huge leaps and bounds into our hearts, too, as well. So we care, we're here, and we're going to be around for you, friend. And a second person I'd like to give a shout out to before we get into this would be our daily purveyor of how Leon is doing in hospital, and that's Mr. Steve Anderson, the Curious Cryptid. Without your efforts, a lot of people would be in the dark, and I know that you do a lot of work. You do a lot of work. You're very concerned, and you're a very genuine individual, and we're all lucky to know you. And so thank you, Steve. We certainly appreciate it. And actually, that's a perfect segue into this show, because as you remember, a few weeks ago, we had Steve on this show, and I queried him about the Bigfoot tree. Now, the Bigfoot tree, we're in Brent's wheelhouse when it comes to that. And so the thing, I think that you learned a few lessons from that, Brent, on your own perception of evidence and what have you. I know that we recently saw a video. You and I had discussed symptoms of priming and confirmation bias and whatever. But do you think that's very important for a newcomer who's a new researcher? Heck, even an old researcher can learn new tricks every now and then. But I mean, something that should be aware of is priming and confirmation bias. If you could talk about that just for a minute.
Yeah, I think it's actually incredibly important. Anybody that's coming into the Bigfoot phenomenon to investigate it, to try and find some sort of truth in it, that you have to be aware of priming and confirmation bias and how easily you could get it in this subject, because there's little true evidence, like actual evidence, to go off of. So we have to rely on what other people tell us. And well, you know, when you start getting into the subject, you'll start to see that not everybody is honest, that people have their own agendas, that, you know, some people, it's their own personal Bigfoot. It's personal to them and their own little reality tunnel, but not really so much to everybody else's reality tunnel and reality. But yeah, it was actually the Bigfoot tree that gave me the most insight into priming and confirmation bias, because when I came into this, I was very naive. I was very, I didn't even realize I was investigating the subject like I was, or even knew how to do it. And so I was just trusting of what was going on, what was being presented in the community. And you know, from there, I started the investigation. And then when I got to this tree here, it's one of the most amazing trees, because it produces sounds that are like any other tree, unlike any other tree. It's you know, it sounds like there's roaring and talking and tapping and all this stuff coming from underneath the ground. And so how the whole process worked is, you know, I was primed up when I was taken there by being told all this stuff is going to happen. And then when I got there, that's when the confirmation bias kicked in. And with the tree making all these noises, that was the confirmation that I needed of this bias that I didn't realize that I had at the time. And so, for a period of time there, I believe the Bigfoot was living underneath the tree. I didn't get the opportunity to really investigate it the way it probably should have been investigated, mainly because, it was someone else's investigation, really. And I was there I don't even know why I was there, really. That was quite the process dealing with the tree. And it was actually Stephen Stroyford from Bigfoot Books, Coalition Critical Thinking. I was actually talking to him in a private chat about the tree and about the investigation, and just kind of telling him stuff that I wanted to do with the tree and how to try and figure out what's going on. Because my goal was to try and bring the Bigfoot underneath the tree, which had a tunnel system, which was hypothesized, which I believed in because of all these people who were saying it was true. So that priming kicked in. And so my whole goal was to try and find a cave entrance. And I was talking to Stephen Stroyford about this. And literally the night before I was going up there, and he told him, I was telling him all the stuff I wanted to do and these elaborate tricks and plans and nothing that actually had to do with the Bigfoot tree itself, because I was looking for the cave entrance. So I didn't like going to the Bigfoot tree because there was always a trail cam, people were always leaving recorders there and trail cams were there, by the person who thought they owned it. So I didn't like going back there, but after talking to Stephen, he actually, I was telling him, and he told me that one thing he told me that really resonated was, don't try to prove what's going on out there. Why don't you just go try and find out what's going on out there? And for some reason, that really resonated for me, because I think that when you try to prove something and when you try to find out if something's true or not, those are two different paths that you get taken on. Because when you try to prove it, you are going in line with the previous biases that you might have. And that's actually when I restarted my investigation into the Bigfoot tree and started from ground zero back at the Bigfoot tree, because, like I say, that really resonated for me. And literally within the first hour or so, I was able to figure out the whole process because I didn't have that priming. I wasn't concerned, like, when you go out there and you start hearing activity, before I came to this realization, you would act as if something was down underneath there, and that directed your investigation. Mm-hmm. Well, when I went back there, I didn't do any of that. I just went straight for, well, let's find out what's going on here. And I found out, and I was shocked because I truly believed a Bigfoot lived underneath there, and I could feel the blood drain out of my body. And it was such a long drive home. It was really quiet. I couldn't listen to anything because I was just trying to process everything. I went from believing something that I thought was true, telling everybody that it was true, to realizing that it's not true. Then it's like, well, what do I do with this information? It's like I was in shock and I didn't really know what to do. And talking about it publicly was really difficult because the person was well liked. And so there was a lot of enabling going on, to the point where I was actually told I was going to be blacklisted from the Bigfoot community, and nobody's going to want to work with me, and blah, blah, blah. But I still kind of came out with it and publicly presented what was going on with the tree. And what it was it's a marriage tree. And so it's joined at the very bottom, and it grows out like this. And it's probably about 150, 200 years old. But at the very, very top, there's a branch that's actually embedded into the other tree. So when the treetops are blowing in the wind, it acts like a cell and it pulls on that branch. And what it does is it shoots that sound underneath the tree to the point where the ground underneath is shaking. Like, you can feel the vibration. You can see the dirt move underneath your feet. And so that's why it's like all the focus is down there, because that's where everything is being directed at. Not realizing up top about 100 feet or so is this branch that has these little nubbies on it. So when it gets pulled, it's like a record almost, like one of those old style records where it just creates all these different sounds depending upon where the branch is at in that tree, and how much the wind is blowing and stuff. Because there might not be any wind at the very bottom of the tree, but there's wind up at the very top of the trees. It was quite the popular tree. It was written about in like 5 or 6 books. It was something that, this was the information that I found, and it was something that I had to share people about, because it's just kind of what you do. And that was when I first started to learn about priming and confirmation bias. And And, since then, I've been able to better understand it even more. And I try to communicate it and talk to people about it and make videos about it to get other people who are like me that come into this subject very naive and trusting of people, that there's something that can happen to you that will affect your investigation that you don't even realize. Because like I was ignoring red flags and, it just really derailed my investigation because of the mindset that I had. I was not getting anywhere close to the truth. I was just going down some fantasy rabbit hole that I was kind of creating for myself by going off all this previous evidence and all the lack of evidence I was getting at that certain time. And so that's why you'll see various videos me using this Bigfoot tree as an example, because it fooled a lot of people. I mean, people like Adam Davies, Brian Sykes was involved in it, and it's just quite the amazing tree, and it was very insightful. It kind of was a lot. It was kind of dramatic going through it, just because of the people involved. But I was very happy and lucky and fortunate to go through it because it gave me such a learning experience that I was able to grow from and utilize into my future investigations of trying to get to the truth and find out what's actually going on out there. Not try to prove, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that could take you down a different road. I just want to try and find out, and I present it in that way. And granted, I don't get the Bigfoot evidence that I'd like to get, but at least this is the truth of what's really going on in the subject. And I'm okay not being that rock star researcher who's not, getting all that evidence and stuff. I'm cool not being that person. I would rather be genuine and honest. So, the people that are like me will have a better example going forward with their own investigation and use as well.
I like.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
There's 2 points. First off, you realize you're on a show with a bunch of old guys and call records old school. You've just stabbed us in the heart.
But no, they made a comeback.
but second to that, I like your point about you're not in it to present evidence to the world. You're there to collect an answer. And I know, and I'm speaking for Thomas a little bit here, he's been here for 40 years. And one of the questions that he constantly gets hit with is, why after 40 years haven't you presented, the Bigfoot photo or the groundbreaking piece of evidence, whatever? And one of the things that he's always said is, A, he doesn't hoax, and B, if it doesn't pass his own vetting, he's not going to pass it on to others. And I really like to see a younger guy like you using that same approach.
Well, Thomas was somebody I kind of mentored myself after, so the credit really goes to Thomas for putting himself out there. That's against the grain in the Bigfoot community, and being out there and being honest and true for his entire investigation. That gives me the guidance that of how an investigation should be ran, and it's my goal to try and pass that off to the even younger generation that's coming in. But it all stems from Thomas, actually. So thank you, Thomas.
You're welcome, Brent. But listen, refresh my memory. I'm trying to remember who was the first guy that brought this so-called Sasquatch tree into and announced that they thought, I can't remember when that started. I remember hearing about it, but I can't remember when that started.
It was Tyler Bounds who first brought the Bigfoot tree to the Bigfoot community, because Lori Simmons contacted the BFRO, and then he came out there and actually found she was being deceptive, but the way that she was able to victimize herself online, she was able to get away with it. And Tyler was just like, ooh, I don't want nothing of this. And then other people got involved, like Adam Davies. Like people were flying in. It's probably one of the most expensive trees, like Bigfoot related things that anybody's ever spent money on, because there's like people, like 5 or 6 people flew in from England to come to this tree, and Brian Sykes came to the tree, and Adam Davies and a film crew, and all these secret expeditions that were going on. And so a lot of people had their hands in it prior to me. And that's why I was like, wow, it's weird that, you know, nobody's really solved this. And, but I found out why, because of the control the person thought they had over the particular area. And the tree is actually in a campground. It's a federally ran campground, Marble Creek Campground, like 10 feet off the main road. It's a public area. Nobody owns it.
Yeah, it's just on a creek banker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not. It's probably like 100 yards or so from the creek, and it's where the old creek was during, you know, when the previous river was in that area. But it's a very unique tree. Like, I can't express how unique it is. I take non-Bigfooting people there, and they're so blown away. They're scared even at times with how loud and forceful it can get. It's an amazing tree.
Reminds me of a tree that used to be in the woods behind my cousin's house in Bancroft, Ontario. The girls started calling it the witch's tree, and we all eventually did, because every time the wind blew, it's a great big maple, you know, a whole bunch of tall maples, and every time the wind blew, it would cackle.
Yeah, this year it was really incredible, because I think there's a lot to play as far as the different sounds, because it really does sound like there's breathing underneath there. So I think the tree might be hollow. Actually, Leon was talking about like a tuning fork tree is what they call them up in Canada. So it's probably hollow as well, and which amplifies a lot of the sound that goes down in there and kind of messes with it. Because that's actually when I first realized it was the branch up there. Is I heard the sound traveling down the tree, and it's like, you know, it's like, wow, it was so obvious. But it was a really windy day, or the wind was really starting to pick up, and that was the first time I've ever been there when it was so windy and stuff. And because before, the person would only allow you to be there for about 5 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes, and then she'll be like, "Oh, I'm scared, guys, we got to leave." You know, when action would start to happen, you know, when the thumping was, because she was just, you know, she said she was afraid, but in reality, it was most likely to keep people from figuring out what was going on there.
Did most of the activity or the sound was there seasonal or?
Well, the place is closed probably 4 months out of the year or so, if not longer, just because it's so remote in the North Cascades that the road is closed, that you can't even get back there. So it doesn't matter if it's cold, warm. Actually, on warmer days, it'll sing a lot more, because I think the wood is a lot more looser, you know, and able to do whatever it does. You know, it's better to resonate and stuff. So yeah, it you know, it doesn't matter if it's spring, or fall or summer, it'll still create the same type of sounds. The thing is, you just got to be out there at the right times to collect it and stuff. Like, it took me it would probably take me like days upon days to collect all the sounds there, leaving a recorder out there all the time, just because it's such a dynamic tree that it's incredible.
Well, you know, I'm glad you touched on there for a while about priming and confirmation bias, because I'm sure once you are accustomed to such things and know how to adapt it to yourself, you can see it in other people's reports. You can feel it at a gut level, even if you don't understand why you're not too fond of this report. There's something at a gut level telling you you're being primed, or there's a confirmation bias going on in there. And it can also be done the opposite way too. You can scuttle your own evidence by including priming and confirmation bias. Myself and you spoke about, I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but we spoke about a video that we both saw. And right away, the priming and the confirmation bias started at the beginning because of an action that the person videoed did. It is an action. They weren't hoaxing or anything like that, but it was an action that usually leads to a hoax. Let's put it that way. So right away, you're on guard. Like, why did he do that right at the beginning of the tape? It sort of ruins everything to come, you know, whatever it might be. And that's an example of scuttling your own evidence, is doing something like that that leads the observer on, instead of letting them make up their own mind and their own conclusion. It's hard to explain without going into detail about the video, but I'm not getting into that.
But you are right. You know, it's I'm very well of timing and confirmation bias. I could spot it incredibly easily. But some can even get by me. But it's an interesting thing. Even though when I'm out there, like in an investigation, out there deep in the woods, I still have to keep myself in check of not getting, caught in the narrative that of what we think is going on out there, like, attaching Bigfoot to it, even though we don't really have the evidence to support that. And so it's really actually still a challenge. It's not so much a challenge, but it's something that I still have to be aware of, even now, to not get those biases when I'm out in the woods, when I'm actively out there, to build up that a narrative that's really not even there. So it's a constant challenge. It's not something you just learn and poof, you're good to go from there on. It's something that you have to keep reminding yourself, because especially if you're out there with other people who are primed up, you got to watch out of that kind of bleeding on over to you, and you starting to go down that road.
Yeah, exactly. Could you do something for me?
Sure.
I've been wanting to ask you this for quite some time. Who is Cosmo?
Oh, he's a
How
buddy
did
of mine.
you meet Cosmo? What did you and Cosmo do together? And where is Cosmo today?
Yeah, I actually met Cosmo through another investigator who, Cosmo's a local guy, and he was on YouTube. He's had some really good Bigfoot experiences, which could be Bigfoot experiences. And if you go look on my channel, you'll see, him talking about it and stuff. And so we actually met that way probably about 5 years ago, maybe. And, he's just somebody that I'm just able to get along with, all the time. And we go out to some of the most remote areas, do some of the most remote bushwhacking, and I have his back, he has my back. And during the winter times, he'll kind of, get away from the Bigfoot subject. So we're actually going to probably go out here soon, and all of us really. So he's still around, but he's got some really good Bigfoot, some really interesting things that happened to him down there. But yeah, he was pretty much one of the main guys that I would go out and investigate with, and our schedules would align up most of the time, because that's one of the hardest parts, is getting people's schedules to align, because you do kind of want to go out with people, especially in some of these more remote areas, just because you get that comfort and stuff. But sometimes you have to go out by yourself. But so that's who he is. He's a good guy that I could trust, and he's not going to do any shenanigans. And if he says something happens, I definitely believe him. But we don't have any. We have weird stuff that happens, but we've never seen Bigfoot doing it.
But it's so hard to find somebody who you think is on the same page as you. I can talk to this guy about this thing, and he's not going to pass it off or anything like that. He'll give an honest answer, what he thinks, and you do the same back to him. It's really hard, because at the beginning of the show, like I said, so many people are in this for different reasons, and they want different results. So how hard is it to find someone who's on the same page as you, who thinks like you, and who's looking for the same results as you? Maybe in a different manner, but you're looking for the same results. You agree on that much anyway, even if it's something as simple as kill, no kill,
Yeah, and it's hard to find people like that. And I'm fortunate that, it's taken me years, but I think that I've kind of surrounded myself with some really good people that are really I'm going to help them, and they'll help me, and we'll help each other kind of get to more of the answers that we are looking for. And they're like-minded people like Curious Cryptid, Tristan, David, just Cosmo, and a bunch of all these other people. So I feel very fortunate. I'm very optimistic about 2022, because I think we actually have a chance to really vet out some of these areas to see what's going on, to really maybe collect evidence if Bigfoot is in the area. And these are really good people that elevate my game, because my skill level is right here, but working with all these other people like Steve Curious Cryptid and stuff, it elevates my game, because there's so much higher in all these other fields that, that they just, when we're all together, it's like a well-rounded person, because I have my shortcomings too. everybody has their shortcomings. So we just work within those and work with the people who will help us in our own shortcomings to kind of help get to the answers that we want. Not to take advantage of people or anything, but we just need to recognize where we are and what our skill level is. Like, I am by no means a master tracker or anything like that, but Cosmo's really good at it. He's really good at tracking, being a nature observer. So I like going out with him because he helps elevate my game. And whenever I get evidence that's like, wow, this is really weird, I have a good group of people that I will help vet it out with, like Steve Curious Cryptid again, and just a bunch of other people that I'll vet all this evidence out, so I don't have to worry about presenting something to the public that's not what I think it is, where I have to walk it back or say, oh man, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. So I don't ever want to be in a situation where I have to be like, oh man, I'm wrong about that, because that means I just wasted a lot of my time and turned everybody else's time.
Yeah.
Is Cosmo an alias?
Yeah.
I just asked that because your first question was, who is Cosmo? And we still don't know.
Yeah. He's the man, the myth, the legend. He's like Bigfoot himself.
So that's gonna be a new thing. Where's Cosmo?
Where's Cosmo? Yeah. That could be a good one.
But just to follow up on Brent's comment, I like your approach, because I found years ago I was in industry. I was part of a very weak team, and there was a lot of the company I worked for had a lot of silo structures, and there was finger pointing. And we had a new boss come in, and he revamped a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of pain in it. But at the end of it, we had a very strong team. And one of the things, and what you're trying to build, is when we closed the doors in our team meetings, we were harder on each other than other people could be on us. But it was a positive way. And when we came out of the room, everyone had a consensus, or if we didn't have a consensus, those that were didn't agree with it, you would never know that they weren't in agreement with it. And that's where our team is really important. If you guys can get together, and even in the meeting, if it looks like to an outsider that you're trying to rip each other's heads off, but you're not, you're just being respectful in your difference of opinion. If you can go through that, and then when you put that information to the outside world, you vetted it every way possible, and the evidence is valuable. So I like that you do use that approach. And, you may get surprised every once in a while, but if you're confident in your peers and they're confident in you, that's a huge step in keeping yourself grounded.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And, we still work as individuals, but we still work together as a group. And this year, I think we're going to work together in a way that, man, I think it's going to be really beneficial for us all to help each other in these various areas that we have found that has potential Bigfoot activity in. But if we can all get together with a good research plan where we know exactly what's going to go on during this Bigfoot outing, this overnight outing, this weekend outing, we know who's going to be positioned where, what the goals are, what technology is going to be used to try and do it, and all this stuff. And if all this gets worked out beforehand, when we go out there, we'll probably have a higher level of success versus just the random stuff that we have been doing lately in the last many years up here.
And one of the other things that I also like that you talked about earlier is with confirmational bias. And there's one way that I always use to look at for people that are talking about it, and that's if they are using absolute terms. So if somebody says, coyotes never do this, or I've heard every sound a blank makes, you know that what they're doing is building up for you to believe in their confirmational bias. So I'm glad you talked about that, because that is huge. And even things like when you see the title of some YouTube videos, as soon as you look at the title, you know that it's going to be a video that's going to confirm their preconceived, notion. So I like the approach that you're taking and your group is taking. I think it's well-rounded.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's really one of the best ways to approach it, and for the ultimate success, less drama, and because we all want the same thing. We all want to kind of find out what's going on out there. We'd all like to see one and collect the best evidence possible, and work together on doing it, because we can each teach, we can learn from each other. And I've learned a lot from everybody that I've collaborated with. And I hope I was able to offer something to them on it. But yeah, it's definitely the best way to go. There's less ego involved, and more actual focus on what should be done.
Yeah, Brent, you've been, put it simply, sticking to the facts and not deviating from the facts. That's the way to go.
Heck yeah.
Where have I heard that before?
And if you can have a good time doing
Who
it,
said that? Damn it.
Cosmo.
Anyway, Cosmo said it. He's a smart guy, that Cosmo. That's why I had to ask about him.
Hey, he's actually one of the best nature observers. Because I don't really consider myself or anybody else really a Bigfoot researcher, because there's nobody's directly researching a physical Bigfoot right in front of them. So we're just nature observers, investigators, or whatever.
Yep, investigators.
And Cosmo is one of the best ones that I've come across. He's really good, and he's really good at noticing the minute details of the tracking and stuff. And he's a really good person. I can't talk enough good about that guy.
Well, there's actually quite a few real Sasquatch researchers out there, Brent. They just can't do it with anybody witnessing it.
Oh, yeah. You just got to take their word for it.
Yeah.
In their next book.
Yeah.
So tell me, Brent, tell me about your son. Does he still take excursions out into the backcountry with you?
Well, not right now, because he just broke his collarbone during wrestling. But
oh man.
Yeah. I got I got 3 kids, and none of them are really interested in Bigfoot. I got 2 girls that are older than him, all teenagers and stuff. And they're teenage girls, and they don't really like Bigfoot. But I do like trolling them with their friends. Like for instance, if I have to go pick them up or something, and I'll keep a Bigfoot cast underneath the seat of my car. And so when the friends come out, I'll just put the cast in the back seat. So when they get in, they'll have to see it. I do that just to embarrass the kids. But yeah, with my son, he's actually more into ghost hunting. So he's more into that whole thing, which I'm not really, but you try to do stuff that you want to do with kids. I can't, he thinks Bigfoot's very possible, but he's more interested in that. So, we're going to go do stuff like that, more stuff like that, as far as ghost hunting and going on some of these haunted trails and just explore that. Just like I said, it's not like I'm a ghost hunter or a believer. It's just try to do stuff like that with the kids. But he comes out with me on Bigfoot outings occasionally, and he's braver than most adult men that I've been out to the woods with. As far as him not being afraid of him sleeping out there in a tent by himself, and so yeah, it's fun to try and bring them along when they want to explore it. I don't really try and shove the whole Bigfoot thing down their throat. I just let them, they said there's not enough evidence to support it, and I respect that, because it's true. There really isn't enough evidence. And I took them up to the Bigfoot tree when I thought it was real, but they still didn't even really believe that.
I can see the car ride home now, paranormal, zoological. You're sleeping outside the tent tonight.
The beauty is, Brent, like, neither of my daughters are interested in Sasquatch, and my oldest daughter's always said when she was in university that she was going to do a study on Sasquatch researchers. She said, but where I found when my kids were little is it brought out a love of camping with them. And when we went out, and even most of the camping, nothing to do with Sasquatch, but it was all about, walking trails, how to, what to do if you're lost, wild edibles, all that sort of thing. And even though they have no interest in Sasquatch, that time spent with them in the woods. I mean, they're 32 and almost 31 now, and they still go out hiking and they still do that stuff. And if you can spend quality time with your kids, even if you're on the hunt for Sasquatch and they're on the hunt for wild orchids, it's still a great bonding time. And if you can do that with them, that's a great thing.
That's actually the beauty of Bigfoot is, you don't have to find it in order to enjoy where it's at. And there's so many different things that you can do out in the forest that it doesn't always have to be about Bigfoot. And that's the beauty of it. That's why I love this subject, because it introduced me into so much more things out in the wilderness that I necessarily wouldn't have been interested in, like rock hounding, mushroom hunting, gold panning, all this different stuff. And so it's a blessing in disguise in a way, whole Bigfoot subject, because it just opens you up to so much more that you might not have been.
Yeah, that's look. When you've been at this for a few years, your fondest memories are the places you've been, the people you've seen, the people you've met. Not so much the subject itself, but it's the things that surrounded the subject. I mean, I've went many places I never would have gone without any kind of interest in a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. I've met a lot of really great people I never would have met. I learned a lot of things about camping and being in the outdoors. And hey, that can't be registered as a failure. Even though I still have no proof of a Sasquatch existing. I mean, I had one hell of a time not claiming any kind of proof.
Yeah.
So, it's what kind of advice would you give to a new person just starting out? Someone who, following the forest paths like you did. I think you touched on it. First of all, you can learn a lot about the woods, mushrooms, berries, what have you, the edibles and what to avoid and things like that. I think this is a great hobby for a young person, no matter what the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody's getting into this subject, and you have to first ask yourself what your goals are. Why are you getting into this subject?
Absolutely.
I was like, I kind of, first it was a hobby, and I kind of wanted to find out what was going on and really see one and to get a confirmation that they're real. That's ultimately my goal, and collect the evidence along the way. And if I prove it, great. If I don't, great. I don't really care. But that's what my goal is. And so I would recommend people truly sit down and figure out what their goal is in this subject. Do they just want to be entertained by the stories, which is cool. If you're a story person, that's great. There's a lot of channels and stories out there. But you first have to understand that a lot of them probably aren't real, or they are sensationalized to the point where it's like not real. So you can't really use that as evidence. It's just a story. Other people like us that are more boots on the ground want to try and get to the cold hard truth about what's going on, and so just find out what your goals are and find people who have the same goals as you, and just kind of start associating with them, start learning, talking to them. First off, reach out and talk to them, and that's the best advice I can ever give.
I covered that in Sasquatch 101. Part 2, I believe, is that before you start off on this, as you just said, sit yourself down and ask yourself why you want to do it. What are you hoping to obtain from doing it, and how much time can you devote to it? And they're important questions. They are, because you don't want to set yourself up for disappointment. You know what I mean? You want to go into this knowing that you only want to go a certain level maybe with it. But you don't want to make it your life's passion or anything like that. So you set your plans in order to achieve just that much, and not become a Rennie the Hindern or something like that. Just, if you want to be a weekend warrior, nothing wrong with that. Go out every second Saturday, spend some time in the woods, But it's important that you establish that, and to my way of thinking, and from what you just said, you establish that in your own mind first. What do you want to accomplish, and how much time do you have to devote to it? So, I think...
And be fluid on that. I mean, John Green, I asked him the question when Thomas first introduced me to John years ago, and I asked him how he kept his interest so long. And John's best advice, and I think it's anybody that's interested in the subject, is that at different stages in your life, you have different priorities. At some stages of your life, Sasquatch may be your biggest priority, so that's what you go out and do. Other times it might be raising your family. So you put the Sasquatch on the back burner a bit. Other times it may be professional. He said, but it's keeping your life in balance and realizing that maybe at this stage in your career or your life, you can devote more time to it. Maybe at this stage you have to back off. And I know I've gone through that myself. My latest interest in Sasquatch or that is really since my kids got into their 20s and they didn't need, their dad raising them like they did when they were younger. And I think that's just the balance. You just have to keep your life in proper balance and realize there's going to be times when for some of us, not everybody, that Sasquatch may be one of the most important things that you want to do. And at other times it's on the back burner because life happens. Mm-hmm. And just, be aware of that. And the other thing I'd say, to somebody new is don't take yourself too serious. I mean, the subject itself you can be serious at, but I work in the corporate world and, it's a running joke. I get guys sending me memes of Sasquatch and that, and I've been in, conferences where the vice president of a multinational is, joking about my Sasquatch research. If you got a thin skin, it ain't going to happen. You're not going to last at it, and have that humor. And if somebody's laughing with you, that's okay. If they're laughing at you, then you got choices.
I just always say to people, call me what you like. I've been called a lot worse by a lot better.
I believe it.
Well, I try to, I keep my personal life and my Bigfoot life kind of separate. Like I don't ever, like on my Facebook page, there's nothing Bigfoot related. I don't ever talk to Bigfoot or talk about Bigfoot with my family or anything like that. I'll do it with, some friends and stuff, but I keep that whole Bigfoot thing separate in my life because until I find out there's something more to it than what has happened to me, I'm not going to waste anybody else's time with it. As far as trying to keep talking about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You don't have to talk about it, but on my Facebook, I've done things where I've posted pictures from some great lookout points and going, you can't call this a wasted day, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not out to convert anybody, but I don't hide the fact, and I don't bring it up constantly. I mean, it's funny, Thomas, and there's a small group of us that before COVID, we used to meet probably 2-3 Sundays a month for breakfast if we weren't out in the field. And you figure when you have 4 or 5 Sasquatch researchers there, that the subject would be strictly Sasquatch. And I'll bet you there were many, many lunches or breakfasts where Sasquatch never came up once.
Well, who wants to talk about Sasquatch all the time?
I quite often never bring it up unless someone asks me about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I find that somebody brings it up, I really got nothing to say to them about the subject. My son and his wife ask me, well, what do you get out of this? What are you doing? What are your goals? I said, I don't have any goals or anything. I'm just in it out of curiosity and see which way the wind blows. That's all. That's my goal, is to live long enough for somebody to come along with some evidence that I can say, okay, this could possibly be proof someday. But I mean, I don't talk about friends. I don't have friends that I used to have. I retired 4 years ago, and all my your so-called friends on Facebook, all my friends have not contacted me in like 3 years or something. The only people who contact me are people into Sasquatching and Bigfooting.
You can make some good friends in the subject.
Yeah, I'm cool with that because I also have other interests like ATVing and side-by-siding and everything that blends right in with it. So it's almost seamless, my private life and the Sasquatch life. No one can tell, what are you doing? Are you ATVing today or are you looking for a Sasquatch? I'm not going to tell both. You. I could do both if I wish.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. I was talking to Joe Snyder over there at New York, Bigfoot research, and on his show one night, and he brought up, I think it was he did or I did, someone did, about resetting your theory. And I said, well, did you ever have to reset your theories, Joe? And he said, yeah, several times I had to do a major upheaval, of what I believed and what I was looking for. And, because you just find that you're barking up the wrong tree, and you got to be a big enough person to say, no, you're wrong. You got to go back to where you were and attack it in a different angle. Well, I know you've already done that. You've done that. You've done it with the Bigfoot tree. But I mean, I think in something like this, a person, to keep their own sanity, should not be afraid to back up and regroup and come back at it differently.
Yeah, that's what I recommend to people, is to restart your investigation, no matter how far along you are with it. That's what I did with the Bigfoot tree. I restarted it. And when I was able to restart it, I was able to remove the biases. Now, I had that slap in the face, so to speak, from Stephen Schweifert. He just hit the nail on the head that resonated with me. I don't know if that is going to be that resonation that's going to work for everybody else, to remove all that confirmation bias and priming that you've been dealing with.
Tough one.
It is, but for me, that's when I restarted my investigation, and always recommend people to restart their investigation just to make sure they're going down the right path and not going down a path that is because they thought that was the right way to go because that's what they were told Bigfoot was thought to do or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong about evidence. I find so much character in a person when they're able to admit that they're wrong versus trying to defend a lie, or just what happens a lot in Bigfoot subject, where if they're wrong, if the investigator's wrong, they just don't ever talk about it again and just hope it goes underneath the.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate, because that means there's bad information that's being presented to people like me who are going to think, oh, Jesus, is this real? Maybe I should go believe this. Maybe I'll start going doing this in the woods because this is what I believe, and start telling all these other people and spread all this other bad information around. And
it takes a lot of character. We're all familiar with the story of the guy that got hoaxed by his own family.
Mm-hmm. Sam DeLong.
Same thing there. He had balls enough, though, to come out and say to other people and researchers, don't waste your time. It was all a hoax. Mm-hmm. There's nothing up in those woods for you to see. I mean, he's a researcher. He could have just kept his mouth shut, not said anything.
Exactly.
Prove him wrong. Nobody. What do you mean my family hoaxed me? They didn't hoax me. You're full of crap.
Wow.
I found that stuff legitimately. But he didn't.
There's a level of humility that comes along with admitting you were wrong about being hoaxed. And so I really applaud Sam and have so much respect for him to come out and say that, because it's so rare in this subject. And I always applaud people who have that strength and courage to come forward.
Because everybody wants to be right and nobody wants to be wrong.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to be wrong.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how it would have affected me if I were in his position. Do I just shut up about it and let it blow over? There's always something new happening in Sasquatch world. Next month, nobody will even remember me or this happening. Or do I speak out?
You're never too old to learn you could be wrong about something. Yeah, I learned a couple years ago I was wrong about red eye reflection. I never would have believed it until it happened to me. Mm-hmm.
I think he was more forgiving than I would have been under the circumstances, to be honest. But going back a bit, you talk about when you talked to Stephen and how he was able to give you a reset, and you've either knowingly or unknowingly you've built up a peer group of people you trust that you can bounce the ideas off of. And that's exactly why these peer groups are important. And that's part of the problem, I think, with a lot of the Sasquatch research out there is there's so many people that are researching in isolation, and they don't have that peer group that they can trust and that they can bounce information off of to get other ideas. And I think Stephen's group, the Coalition for Critical Thinking and whatever the hell he has it on Facebook, it's got a lot of value. I mean,
Oh man, yes.
sometimes it gets a little rough for people that don't want to be reasonable, but I think, and that's part of what our group is trying to do is set out, put the tendrils out to have peer groups where we can bounce ideas off reasonable people, because we may have an issue in BC that we're stumped by, and we could talk to somebody like you in Washington State that says, hey, yeah, I ran across that, and this is what we found. And I think that's really important. We got to get out of our cells and network with peer groups that we trust.
Oh, absolutely. And just on the online peer groups that we've had, we've helped each other out. And as you mentioned, Joe Snyder, he had this owl sound that he at the time had a hard time identifying, and other people helped him identify it, and he's now like, hey, check out this owl sound. But without that peer group, he would probably still not know what made that sound, and it might lead to a belief that it was actually Bigfoot making the sound. But since he had the good resources and the right frame of mind, he was able to properly vet it out and continue his investigation on finding the truth.
Jerry and I went through something similar with the Chehalis sounds.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Boy, there were a lot of people who didn't want to hear that.
Oh yeah, well, you're taking Bigfoot away from people. You're taking a part of Bigfoot's evidence that really helped solidify it. You're taking it away from them.
Yeah. Killed the unicorn, shot down their Santa Claus.
Yeah. Good job, man. But I will say this: I don't know who was saying it earlier, but someone was saying that when someone says, "Oh, I know what coyote sounds make," or "I know all the sounds coyotes make because I've been in the woods my whole life," that there just irritates me to no degree, because nobody knows. I know a coyote expert. He says that they make 150 different sounds, that they themselves don't even know all the different sounds that they make. It's such a vast thing, and it's such a rare occurrence to hear some of these sounds like you heard it, that nobody can ever say that. And if somebody does, that's a red flag for me.
Yeah, I see Leon was here. He said, "Now that was an authorityism or an authority play or something on that guy's part. As soon as he says, I know every sound they make, or I've been doing this for 15 years now, but right away, authoritarian thing coming out, how dare you argue with me? I know these things."
Yeah.
Leon, we miss you.
Yeah. And with people like that, that's usually a red flag that I will plant there and be like, I'm going to start taking, perceive their information from behind that red flag. Yeah.
Like I'm not here to be argued with or anything like that. I'm imparting a fact to you. You better believe it, because I know what I'm talking about. What do you think? Would you advise a beginner in this to go out and take a GPS course or something? Because whenever I turn on the 6 o'clock news, at least once a week, SARS is going off in a helicopter to pick up some hiker that's running around the mountains in a pair of runners, or maybe a pair of sandals and a T-shirt. And, respect Mother Nature.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the point I'm trying to get at. Respect Mother Nature. You're not invincible. Mother Nature's powerful, more powerful than you are. So,
well, Jerry, a broken clock can be right twice a day, and I'm saying that because of David Pilates. I mean, I don't believe anything he says, but one thing that he does talk about ad nauseum is safety in the woods. And he talks about redundancy. Like when he goes out, he has his satellite communicator and a PLRB, and he recommends that people have that. So if they do go out there and they get lost, they can either use a satellite or the person locator beacon. And I think anybody that's going out there into the woods, especially nowadays with the technology that's relatively inexpensive, you need to have, or you should have, a satellite communicator like a Spot or a Garmin in reach.
Yeah, man, just hit the red button and wait for the helicopter to come.
It helps SAR, and it helps your families. Thomas found a missing hiker's part of a missing hiker skeleton one time, and one can only think if they had a satellite communicator, it would have turned out different.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things.
You and
That's
Bill
one of the other
Miller
things.
came across it in one time, didn't you, Thomas?
Say that again, Jay.
You and Bill Miller, an upper cage, a human.
Yeah, that was Then we found the rib cage and spinal column of a man who had been missing for 4 years. Yeah, and we told the RCMP about it, thinking, oh, okay, they'll probably want us to go take them out there, and they'll come in one of their 4-wheel drive vehicles, cordon off the area, do investigations. No, they handed us an orange bag and said, bring it in.
Who was this researcher years ago that had this customized 4x4 vehicle? He had radar, he had thermal, he had night vision. He had, I think he had it for sale. He wanted 100,000 or something for it. Now there's a number of them around now, but I mean back then this was very unique. This was back in the 90s, the 80s. Satriella? No.
Are you talking about that van where he had a flare that went up like a submarine periscope?
I think so. I think that could be it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whatever happened to that. Yeah.
Very unusual at the time. I mean, state of the art,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Brent.
Oh no, go ahead.
So tell me, have you ever found a footprint where you could say, if there's a Sasquatch, he made that print?
I found a lot of impressions that have a lot of potential, but nothing to that degree of like, I think it was a Bigfoot. It could have been. I don't ever try to have myself go down that way without having the evidence to support it. Yeah, because I know people actually go out and fake Bigfoot prints. I am part of hiking groups locally, and occasionally you'll come across Bigfoot threads, and especially if you do a search on them. And and some of the threads, you'd see people talk about how they have friends that will go out and plant Bigfoot prints, not so much to be there when someone finds them, but just to leave them there in hopes that somebody does find them eventually. Yeah, so I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, as far as prints or something, yeah, nothing really concrete. I've come across impressions. I mean, the ground here isn't very conducive for print formation. Very, very hard to find good prints. A lot of places I go are like remote old growth areas where it's got a nice layer of moss on the very bottom ground, so it's really hard to get the prints that way.
I mean, like where I live, we're surrounded by mountains all the way around. And it's rather futile to go looking for footprints in the mountains. As you just said, it's all solid rock with about an inch over it. Better to go walk the riverbeds and stuff like that.
Yeah, the one that I'm really that I've experienced the most are wood knocks. And I'm usually really good at vetting stuff out. And these wood knocks, I haven't been able to properly vet out. Some of them I've actually recorded, but the most memorable one is there's this area out in the North Cascades where I'd get out of the car and there's a single wood knock and it sounds like a home run being hit, and that's it the entire day. So that happened a few times, and then some friends came into town and I took a bunch of people, or it was 3 other people, back up to this area, and I'm like, yeah, whenever I get out of the car, there's always a tree knock, and so we open the door, nothing. There's like no sound, no nothing. I'm like, figures. One time I bring somebody up here, because I didn't record it at the time because it was like, didn't really think of it. And so I was like, oh, great, there you go. I hope to show somebody something cool, and didn't happen. Well, a little later, we went probably a little further down this trail, and I did a wood knock, and then all of a sudden we had something wood knock back. So actually wood knock was something back and forth in the woods. And this is an incredibly remote area that we've had previous potential evidence or experiences that has a long history of Bigfoot, and there's one road in there, and there's no real reason for anybody to kind of be back. I'm not saying that it's not, but you kind of see if somebody was back in this area. just from how the location is, or not see them, but you'll see if there's a camp or something, especially if you go look further and stuff. But yeah, they couldn't find what was making the sound, and it was in response to us. So it seems like there's an intelligence behind it. It was not a woodpecker. It was not a tree hitting another tree by accident because of the wind. It was a deliberate wood knock back and forth. And I've experienced wood knocks on various occasions with various people. Like I said, even recorded some of them. And I that's the one thing I cannot figure out. Impressions I can chalk up as like maybe it's a bare double print or a human or whatever. So the information isn't there. But with these, I can't figure it out. And I have looked long and hard to try and vet this out as far as what could cause this. And so far, I haven't found anything.
Not enough people bother to vet these days. Or maybe they never ever did bother to vet as much as they should.
Well, it kind of depends upon what they want their evidence to be portrayed as. If they want to be portrayed as the Bigfoot researcher that's out there getting all the evidence, then you don't want to vet your stuff out. You just want to present it as it is, because once you really take a serious approach to your investigation and properly vet it out with people who can help you vet it out, you're not going to really come to any sort of evidence to post to get any sort of recognition of as far
a number of years ago, a good many years ago, there was several different kinds of accepted people who sought Sasquatch and Bigfoot. Those who are in it just to show themselves off for whatever reason, and those who are in it to prove it right or wrong one way or the other. And then there are those who are in it that are not out to please any faction, just themselves. I heard someone describe them once as the invisible researchers. These are the guys who go about their business in the woods. They don't tell anybody what they're doing in the woods, where they're going, and they don't tell anybody what they found. I mean, it's the old saying, you're never going to find Bigfoot on the internet. No, you won't. You're not going to find it on Squatch Talk or any other place. So don't even think about it. But there are those who go out there into the woods just to satisfy themselves. And who knows what evidence they may have found until this date. They're not going to share it. Now, there's two factions here, two camps. One says, yes, they should share. And the other says, no, why should I share? I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for you guys. You guys look for your own evidence. This is just strictly for me. And I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, I've noticed that people that make those claims are like, oh, I don't want to show my evidence, usually because it's not good enough to show it. Because I know people like that. They're like, oh, I got this great evidence. I don't want to present it online. And then when you see it, it's like, I wouldn't present that either. But I think a lot of it is that.
What were you going to say, Bill?
I was going to say, two things. One is, like Brent was earlier talking about the wood knocks. I mean, we have to be able to say to ourselves, there are certain questions that we do not know the answer to. And, I had that weird experience up at Pink Mountain about 10 years ago. I'll probably never know the answer to it. But you have to be satisfied with it. When you look at everything that you do know, it doesn't fall into any of those categories, and you say, I just don't know.
I just leave it as an open investigation. Yep. I don't know what it is. It's still open, and maybe I'll find a conclusion. If not, it's open.
And I found out with a sound that I had heard one time 5 years later when I'm doing something completely different. I heard the same sound that I had for years couldn't figure out. But the other thing with the researcher that Jerry's talking about, the one that doesn't share their evidence, and it's totally up to anybody if they want to share their evidence or not, or what their reasons are. That's fine. But what I've told some people that claim that they have all this great evidence that they're not sharing, I just tell them that in the research of Sasquatch world, if they're not sharing their evidence, then they are meaningless to the subject.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a dead Sasquatch body in my basement and I won't share it with the world, that's no different than if that body doesn't exist anywhere. If it hasn't been shared, it has no meaning to the research at large. So if you're happy with having, a basement full of dead Sasquatch and whatever else, and say a secret that nobody else in the world knows, if you're happy with that, hey, good on you. But you are insignificant in the world of the research.
But the thing is, Bill, the only stuff that is shared is stuff that's pretty well useless.
Oh, I realize that. I'm just saying that. Yeah, I agree with Brent that these people that say they have this great evidence, either A, when they show it, it's because they honestly believe it and it's their own confirmational bias where they think it's great, or sometimes they'll have a story around it where they say they saw something make the footprint or whatever, but we don't have those other factors, so we can't use that when we evaluate the evidence. And then sometimes it's just people that are trying to blow smoke and saying, there's a person on the Bigfoot forum that if anybody mentions any type of a Sasquatch encounter, this person has had that plus one better. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're full of shit. It's just at the end of the day. But yeah, if you have the best research in the world and you're not sharing it, there's no onus on you to share it. But at the same time, you're meaningless to the subject if you're not sharing.
Mm-hmm. Don't go around telling people you have evidence that you don't want to share because you're just being a jerk at that time.
Exactly.
If I had any kind of an evidence, it's highly doubtful I'd put it on the internet to start with, but that's not saying I'm not going to share it. I'm going to share it with the proper people. I'm not going to share it with the internet. And
proper evidence. You like Brent, you haven't found any blue bags out there.
Vetted evidence that
I did have,
vetted evidence that convinces me that this is a real ticket item I got here. Where it'll go, I don't know, but I'm going to be careful who I share it with, And people expect too much from the internet. People expect way too much from the internet. It would be.
That's why.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's why it's good to go outside of the Bigfoot community to vet out your evidence. I've done that before because you can get some amazing insight of what is actually going on. In fact, you just go to some of these logging Facebook groups, forcing Facebook groups. You'll learn so much, like the inverted trees that get shoved into the ground. A lot of people are like, oh, Bigfoot's mad. He's going to grab this tree and just turn it upside down and shove it in the ground. I don't know if Bigfoot's pissed. It's not. It's actually loggers do that to mark territory. They mark boundaries. They mark roads. They mark clear-cut areas. They do it just to do it. Really, they'll put rocks on big stumps. So there's resources out there for us to properly vet out some of this evidence. It's just how much do we want to take to go truly find it out? Because I think a lot of people get emotionally attached to their evidence to the point where they don't want to let it go. They'll defend it tooth and nail. And I think that's kind of a problem, and one of the problems of evidence nowadays is everybody's too emotionally attached to it, afraid of being wrong, afraid it's not at Bigfoot.
And that might be a reflection of the internet itself, But
there are good people out there that don't have anything to do with the Bigfoot community that could still help you vet out your evidence.
Mm-hmm. And the thing, Jerry, is it started before the internet. I have a large family that were logging back in the 80s and that, and I can remember, the tenderfoot coming out there and making wild claims or something like that, and those guys just making it sound like there was a Sasquatch behind every tree. And the fact of the matter is that none of them believed in them. Mm-hmm. They've been logging for decades and said there's no such thing. But if you got the pushy expert out there that came and said this, that, and the other thing, they would, because it was a big laugh to them. And,
sure.
It's the internet is just an easy way of reaching a bunch of people, and it's a reflection on what everyday people do. There's liars out there. There's guys that will joke, will joke with people, but
yeah,
it goes back to finding that peer group that you can trust.
Well, the internet's a soapbox for every snake oil salesman out there. You've heard me say that before.
But I've come across some interesting stuff in some forest logging groups related to Bigfoot. Like I came across this guy. He was in his 80s or so, and he was talking about being there, hoaxing the Bigfoot prints during the Jerry Crew event. How he actually were able to do it. He was telling me how they were able to get the prints on the side of the road and how they were able to get the distance in between them so long without having an impact. Like you're running. He was saying what they did is they had a pickup truck going and they put a 2x4 out the side of the pickup truck, and the 2x4 was anchored by somebody else, and that person would hold onto that 2x4 and walk that way and allow the truck to take them for their next step, and that's how they were able to get such long steps in between it. This guy was talking about how they used a cherry picker to get the 55-gallon drum over the bank. How I got all these messages saved of it, but it's really interesting of what you can find. I don't know if it's true or not, but he was listing a lot of specific stuff and specific people in that area where it's like, wow, it makes you wonder how much true it is, because loggers do like to play jokes on people.
Well, don't they still have that award posted on Willow Creek down in California for anyone who can show how these prints can be made?
I'm not sure that award still exists.
Kinds of soil. Yes, Willow Creek Museum has that reward.
Oh, if the museum still exists, so yeah. But there was a reward out long before the museum. I can't remember who originally put it out, but yeah.
I don't remember either. But yeah, it's been around since I
think it was a Pacific Northwest expedition.
But Brent brought up, again, another great point that we should elaborate on is so much when we do this research, not only is there, talk about confirmational bias, but people tend to look at the experts and say, the experts can't figure this out. The scientists can't figure this out. And many times there's ways where simple people, and when I say simple people, I mean just people like us, that have come up with a low-tech solution and have created a hoax, or sometimes just a methodology that the experts don't think of because they overcomplicate things.
Mm-hmm.
One of my stories that I remember is there's a guy named John Romer, and famous British Egyptologist, and he was talking about years ago in his research, they couldn't figure out how, without the use of transit, how the Egyptians used to have so many buildings that were so level. And he was out, again, as you're doing something different, but you see something that goes to your research. He was out at going towards an open air market, and he saw these people that were building a big building, and what they did is they'd put a ditch around the building. They had a stick in one corner that had a mark on it, and they filled up the ditch so that the water level was touching that mark. And then everywhere in the building, when they were taking measurements, they just took it by measuring from the water, because water finds its own level. And he stopped. He just thought, wow, this is great. Talked to the people, and that's where he figured out, at least in his eyes, where a lot of these buildings are made level is because they were just using water. And yet experts for years are saying, well, it would be impossible to do without transits and laser levels and all that other nonsense. And then you talk to a lot of old timers where they'll use garden hoses to create levels around buildings. So just because somebody that's quote unquote simple or down to earth says they've done it some way, that doesn't mean that they're not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to overcomplicate. I knew an engineer that said that he's a professional engineer, and he had a plaque in his office that said, "Remember, an amateur made the Ark, experts made the Titanic."
That's true.
Hey, Brent, tell me something. If you were about to interview a possible witness, I don't know if you do interviews or not, but I'm just asking, would you use a regular list of questions like Thomas does? Thomas has these little 40 questions of thou shalt not and thou shall that he asks every witness.
Yeah, I'd probably steal Thomas's questions. Just do
Everybody
that.
has Thomas's questions.
Yeah, well, Thomas has the right way of going about it. The questions that he asks, the way he presents it, it helps eliminate and introduce biases. And I don't do that necessarily as professionally as Thomas does. Whenever I came across somebody, I was like, "Hey, man, what you see?" And whatever. But that wasn't in any sort of recording capacity or anything. I was just talking to somebody. But yeah, if I did, I would definitely resort to Thomas's questions and his line of questioning a interviewee.
I'm going to use the Von finger here to interject. And I don't think Patrick has a patent on it. So, have you ever been a member of the BFRO?
No. What's that?
If not, why?
I don't really see a purpose. Like, I don't really, like, there's really nothing anybody else can offer me in this subject that I can't do myself. Like, I already probably know better investigation areas than, a lot of the BFRO does. Now, I know BFRO investigators, and some of them are amazing people. And I think, did you have Rick Knoll? Wasn't he an old BFRO investigator back in the day? Great interview, guys. Yeah, great interview, guys, by the way, with Rick. That was just, man, that was a real treat. You don't really get to hear him very often.
I'm trying to get that guy on since I started doing podcasts. Did you ever get a hold of him?
Not yet. I think you actually first initially gave me the wrong email address because it was Comcast.com, and I think it's Comcast.net, the way it's supposed to be.
I'll double check once we finish this show, but I'm pretty certain it's right. But I know a friend of his who has his address too. I'll double check. If you're watching this, go check your mail.
Yeah, well, because he's a local guy for me, and actually I've ran across some reports that he did for the BFRO, especially mainly about this one that's on Green Mountain that he took back in, I think, 1977. And I just kind of wanted to talk to him about that because that's an area that I investigate quite often and found some really.
It's just a fountain.
Oh, yeah.
What I would really hope, Brent, if you ever do get able to meet with Rick, would be to do a video of him demonstrating his really unique casting method.
Casting ability.
With using his little ripple method. I think a hands-on video where he demonstrates that would be so helpful to so many people because
there has to be footage of that out there because I've seen him demonstrate it with a dozen cameras on him before.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever get that opportunity, I definitely like to document people who can help us, show us ways of doing things better, like casting prints and stuff. Because I know different people have different methods, and some methods will actually ruin the print versus better methods that Rick probably does and stuff. But
you can actually create fake dermal ridges.
That's what I've heard.
If it's too thick, and it's called the pancake effect. And if you're, I would guess that there's some experts that have in their collection pancaked footprints or casts that they think are dermal ridges.
Yeah, and they weren't even trying to fake them. That was just what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they were taken as dermal ridges. Yeah.
Just a follow-up on that last question about the BFRO. I never ever had too much faith in the BFRO since the get-go, so that's no secret. But would you advise a young up-and-comer to join them? Or for that matter, join any group? Would that be a smart idea instead of striking out on your own?
Yeah, I would first define who you are and what your goals are individually before you join any sort of group, because you can get assimilated into a group and you always want to keep your individuality even within the group. So I wouldn't advise anybody to join any sort of group early on. You first want to find out who you are, where you're going, and all that. And then that's when you can start. I call it collaboration. I collaborate with so many good people. We're not really a group, so to speak, like we have an official name or anything, that we have these codes that we live by or whatever. We're just a bunch of random people who have a good set of skill sets that each of us possess, different skill sets and stuff, and we work together on trying to achieve it. But with the BFRO, I just think that it's something that probably needs a new, fresh type of leadership going into it, because if you look at their website, even their website is incredibly outdated, only because I don't think they know how to get all those reports and then transfer it over to newer software, a newer website version that makes it a lot easier, that where websites should be. So it seems like it's been neglected. The group has been neglected. There's great people in the group, but it just seems like it's been neglected over the last many years, because maybe Moneymaker is focused on finding Bigfoot or these other ventures that he hasn't. He lost focus of what the group originally was supposed to be. Because if you look at I looked at the BFRO website the other day, actually, to see if there's any new local reports, because they post them on there. And there's only 2 reports for this month. It's like, geez, it's like nobody reported anything in the month of November. But when you start to find out the process of how reports get posted and stuff, it's quite a lengthy process that's not streamlined. And that's why a lot of it doesn't.
The bar for evidence is like operated on a yo-yo system. It's up there one week, the bar is an inch high off the ground the next week of what is or isn't evidence.
Oh, yeah.
There's no standard for them to vet by. So how can they say this is a Class A, a Class B, Class C, encounter or whatever? Because it just isn't there. But you're right, there was a lot of good people from the BFRO. The very first that I ever met were from the BFRO at one time or another. And it's a shame. It was a good idea. It was a good idea. But
yeah, and it still has a lot of potential. It still has a lot of potential. I just think it needs a fresh infusion of leadership to have a direction of where it should go and have the time and resources to take it that direction. But I think if Moneymaker is the guy who is solely the leadership in that, then it's probably not really going to go anywhere.
Well said. Well said. So tell me, if the PG film was proven to be, say, 3:30 this afternoon, proven to be a fake, it wouldn't affect my curiosity about the possibility of such a creature existing. What about you? Would it be business as usual for you the next day?
No, I'd probably curl up in a fetus position and just suck my thumb and cry in the corner like, no, it's not true. It's not true. It's real. I know, I'm pretty much like you. It's like, if it's not real, then it's not real. It's not the driving point for me to be in this subject. I believe there's something to this because of all the people I've heard that claim that have seen them and stuff, people who I find credible. Those are the people that keep me passionate, that keep me interested in this subject. Not so much the PG film, because it depends upon what day of the week it is. It's like, how much do I believe in the PG film? I went through a lot of work on trying to really fully understand it from all sides, why people are saying it's a hoax, what they're, like with Morris and Hieronymus and Long and stuff, and try to really understand what they're saying so I can get a better perspective if it's something that I should believe or not, because we'll never know if it's real or not. All we can do is come to a conclusion with the information that we have. And for me, it's getting all the information, be it good or bad, to come to a conclusion. And I haven't came to a conclusion just because I don't think we ever truly can. Like, I can't ever say that's a fake or, oh, that's real. It's just going to kind of float and linger in there until we have something to compare it to. But it is kind of odd that nobody's really been able to get evidence that's been comparable to that, which is just really kind of odd. But, if you really kind of think about it, nobody's really doing the research in the way that they were probably doing it. Nobody's out there for weeks on end, living off the land, and so to speak.
There's that, yeah.
It's just people like me usually, which are weekend warriors that only have so much time to dedicate to the subject, so much resources to dedicate. So I think that's one reason why Bigfoot, is still undiscovered, is there's no real resources going towards it.
Yeah, I mean, I never worshipped at the altar of P&G anyway. For me, it was Rennie the Hind, and his book with Hunter was the first book I ever read on the subject of Sasquatch. And he made it for me with one simple sentence. Something got to be making those goddamn tracks. And that's it. That's it for me. That's good enough. You know, basically that's all we got. Our tracks.
I think Dr. Bingerdingle said it best when he was on an interview and they asked him about the PGF, and he said at the time that he took the PGF and he basically took it out of the realm of evidence and put it to the side. And he said, and the reason being is there's so much studying that's been done to say it's real, so much to say it's fake, and the original has been lost or destroyed depending on who you listen to. And he said we can't get any more information out of it than what we've already had, and it's inconclusive.
Yeah,
there's too much effort being wasted trying to say yes it's real or no it's not. So he put it to the side, and that's a position. Like for myself, I don't think what's in the film is a real animal. But having said that, again, Thomas introduced me to Bob, and when he tells a story, he's either a fantastic liar or a God's honest truth guy, and the only reason I think there's any credibility to that is because of talking to Bob. But if I based it solely on the evidence, that the PGF has always looked fake to me.
Well, something else you got to consider too with the PG film is that if you're looking at the enhanced 4K version, that you have to understand that video isn't actually an honest interpretation of what was happening in real life, because I don't think we can really use anything above the digital stabilization of the PG film as an investigation evidence, because when you get above that, when we're talking about 2K, 4K, 8K resolution increasement, the software that is used to create the upscale video actually adds in information that wasn't initially in the video, so it's creating part of the video for us so we can see it. And if you zoom in really close to it, it actually has a cartoonish type of look, so it actually isn't a good source of evidence for us to use in those high-scaled videos. So I always try to bring awareness to that of don't ever use that as evidence of like, oh my gosh, this is a real Bigfoot because look, or it's not a real Bigfoot because look how cartoony it looks and stuff, because the software is a huge factor on how the information is created, and some software is a lot better than others. And that's why I always say don't ever use anything to make a judgment on above the digital stabilization, because anything above that, we don't know what has been added in with the software. And it's shown that when you do zoom in on it, which a lot of people do, it looks more fake. It looks more cartoonish. The edges don't look as real as it should. So just my
and even with the digital stabilization, what you also have to remember is just the film from being shown creates artifacts in there. So that's one of the things that although I disagree with Bill Munn's conclusions, and I think he did a lot of supposition in his when Roger met Patty, one of the things he did do is he did take the original first generation film copies, scan them, and then he did a method of putting one on top of the other, and where anything didn't match, he took out as an artifact, and he just did that process until he had, one film which or one scan that took out most of the artifacts. And you are right, and the other thing is a lot of people are taking their stabilizations away from a VHS copy that Mrs. Patterson gave out to various groups. So that already had failures in artifacts in the film. So yeah, when these people do the 4K and go, oh, look at everything you can see. Well, you can't take the old silk purse or Salzy and make it into a silk purse. And there were in 16 millimeter film, there's technological constraints on that. That's just the nature of the film, especially when you have a guy that's running and it's bouncing around. You're never going to get anything really clear than a first generation copy.
Absolutely. And people got to remember, in 1967, there was a huge difference between professional filmmaking and home movies. People say it's this, it's that, but Patterson Gimlin film was no different than your grandmother's whole films of family picnics back in the day. Or the Zapruder film of the Kennedy assassination. That's the best you're going to get.
Could you tell me why John Green was squeezed out of the possession, ownership, stewardship of that PG film by Rennie DeHinden and Bob Gimlin?
John Green was never squeezed out of the ownership of the PG film. He was never in the ownership.
He signed a contract. He signed a contract.
Well, what you're talking about is the old contract, Canadian lecture rights to the film.
In 1968, yes.
Yeah, that was Canadian lecture.
Yeah, and then the contract ran out.
Yeah.
And Hinden and Gimlin wanted the rights back from him, so he'd had to pay $500 if he was.
No, what happened was Rennie and Bob really didn't want to do it, but Rennie sort of badgered him into it. Sued Mrs. Patterson for rights to certain stills of the Patterson Gimlin film, and Bob Gimlin didn't really, because he actually likes Mrs. Patterson. He didn't like the idea, so he just basically threw his hands up and said, "Rennie, you can have my rights, $20." And that's why Rennie had certain rights, paperwork saying he had certain rights to certain stills of the PG film. And you tried to put any of those images, like 352 or something, in a book between 1977 and to the day he died. He went after you for it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was going through my bookshelf today just before the program, and I took a book down, and in it there was a letter from a lawyer to John Green.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you the crux. It says, "Dear Mr. Green, this is to advise you that the contract dated January the 8th, 1968, a copy of which is attached, is hereby canceled. In addition, any and all verbal and implied agreements between yourself and Robert Gimlin and or Rennie DeHinden concerning the Bigfoot film is hereby canceled. In addition, we request that you return all copies of the Bigfoot film that are now in your possession." And it goes on to say that you will have to apply for a notice and pay a fee of $500 should you wish to use it in the future.
Yeah, that was Rennie DeHinden's letter.
And Rennie's signature or his initials are on the bottom.
Yeah, and of course Green ignored it, and he was had every right to do it because Rennie couldn't enforce any of that garbage.
That's why I just get it.
Why would he limit access to it, like to that stuff, to like the pictures? Is it just he wanted other people not to profit from it?
I think Rennie at first was, who the hell are you coming into my business here on anything to do with Sasquatch for the longest time? Rennie and John had a falling out in 1967 when Rennie stuck a shotgun in John Green's face in Northern California. And even though they still communicated, Rennie sort of didn't want to have much to do with John Green after that. And it just sort of tolerated his presence. What Jerry's talking about was Green and DeHinden together managed to get the Canadian lecture rights to the film in 1968. And of course, after Rennie threw another one of his tantrums, or whatever, got mad at Green for whatever reason, he'd have these legal aids or whatever write up all these things. Can't do this, can't do that. You have to do this. You have to give me $1,000 for this or that.
Yeah.
And John Green had a small binder full of things from Renee like that, and he just said no. I played it safe when I put 352 in my books. I asked Renee for permission to do it. Like you always see copyright ready to end it underneath.
As you said, he goes on further to say, you're further put upon notice that if copies of the Bigfoot film are ever again shown in public or private, that a showing fee of $500 will be required.
Oh, yes, that's Renee. That's Renee trying to extort John Green.
Yeah, or damages, it says. In addition, if you have left any copies of the film with any persons, corporations, or other agencies, would you please provide us with their names, addresses, and
yeah. Now, what lawyer actually talks like that? Yeah.
It is our understanding that you have left 2 copies of the film in San Francisco for analysis. So we demand that you obtain and return both copies to us immediately. The cancellation of all contracts and agreements is effective as of this date.
Yeah, that whole letter is one gigantic piece of BS. It was just Rennie trying to extort his will and monies from John Green.
Sounds like things haven't really changed much in the Bigfooting subject, huh?
They haven't changed at all.
Renee, like I said, Renee was Renee. There was no other way to describe it.
I mean, Barbara Watson Butler wrote this wonderful book, my favorite Sasquatch book I ever read, and it's called Sasquatch Apparitions.
I'm hurt, Jerry.
And okay, you're second best, but this is the best. And in it, she doesn't talk about Sasquatch at all. She talks about the researchers from back in the day. Mm-hmm. And I just love that book. It's one of the reasons I started this podcast. I don't pay as much attention to the critter as I do the people researching the critter.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I'm actually that way. I find the people who investigate the subject equally as interesting because I like people watching, so I like to try and figure things out. Like, man, why is this person doing this? Why would he say this stuff? Why?
Well, I don't want to start rumors, gang.
Well,
because quite frankly, I love Renee DeHaan. He was a good friend of mine, and I was very friendly and got along great with the late Barbara Watson. But you notice in that book, she just has nothing negative to say about Renee at all, but a lot of negative things to say about everybody else.
You have the book. I got it from you to read it.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's out of print for the past 30 years.
Yeah. Well, for a few years, I believe Renee and Barbara were a little more friends.
Ooh. It's picking more than lead shot out of the back 40, huh? Yeah. Good for you, Renee. Someone's making those damn tracks.
But the fact remains when you look at Rennie's behavior back then, and Thomas said, everyone just said it was Rennie being Rennie, or when they were doing a conference, they had to build in the Rennie factor. Mm-hmm. The fact remains is he was an asshole. I mean, that's when you look at what he was doing, and I never met the man personally, so I mean, I'm just going by, seeing different conferences where he stood up and
it's not Mr.
started shouting from the cheap seats about trying to shut people down and that. I mean, when you look at that behavior, that was just not good behavior.
Oh no, Renee!
Yeah.
No. Yeah, Renee was disruptive. He was bombastic. And once he got in his bad side, he never forgot it. He got something on him, he really hated it. And he was Renee.
But he at least stood up for himself too. And
oh boy, did he ever, yeah.
Yeah, and didn't get, present any sort of bad evidence or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, he had a lot of great things as a researcher, but he didn't
get some good qualities and some bad ones. Yeah.
But he was a first-rate researcher, and for a man who never went above grade 5, he sure had a logical and analytical mind.
Yeah, I mean, he was a pit bull. I mean,
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah.
But I mean, when people talk about Rene, they sort of romanticize his behavior, but when you actually look at it objectively, I mean, he was a great researcher, no doubt. His Kokanee commercials are some of the funniest commercials that ever happened. One of the best things that ever happened to Sasquatch research. But, at the end of the day, if we had somebody today doing that same behavior in Sasquatch conferences and that sort of thing,
I'd be a pariah.
it wouldn't be accepted. It wouldn't be, oh, that's just, Thomas being Thomas, right? It would be, that's just not acceptable.
Yeah.
That's Rene. We're here today to celebrate Brent. So Rene, roll in your grave. We're going to carry on.
Well, people used
Now, I
to.
know you've appeared on a lot of podcasts, Brent. A lot of podcasts, such as this one. For the most part, you talk about the coalition of certain channels and whatever. What do you think? Is the message getting out there that people should be a bit more discerning in what they believe is evidence or how they vet their evidence? Or are the lunatics still running the asylum? Are we making any headway is what I just want your impression.
No, I don't think we are. I think the inmates will always run this asylum until some better evidence or something more concrete exists, because it's so easy for somebody to come in and create their own Bigfoot narrative, their own personal Bigfoot, and go spread it around. And so until we get some solid facts, this is what we're going to have to deal with. And we do help other people in our discussions, other channels and other investigators with the discussions and podcasts on their own investigations. And so there are people who are being, that are being affected by the discussions that we are having in a positive way. But even then, it's always recycling itself. The subject every few years, a handful of years, other people become more relevant, other people fade in the back and stuff like that. But it's still, nothing's really changed as much. We just need to keep promoting a more non-biased way of looking at it and approaching the subject and stuff. And hopefully somebody will collect that evidence so we can actually start building the foundation off of. So, all these other people can't hijack this subject for their own personal gain or for their whatever reason why they need to do it, either psychological or emotional or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well put, man. Well put. Tell me something. What are your research patterns? Like, do you have one area like a lot of people have, or do you try out different areas on a rotation, or how do you approach it? How do you approach your research?
I first try to investigate and research the area as much as possible, get myself in good areas where you think that they might be. I've been investigating the Bigfoot phenomenon for probably about a good 7 years now, and I would say over the last few years I've developed areas that I have finally tuned in on. Wow, there really might be something going on here, especially when you take other people out there who are like-minded, don't have that priming issue or anything, that are like, yeah, there's something kind of going on here. And, just trying to get the resources into these areas and try to figure them out. But I investigate the entire, most of Washington, any place. Like I'll go down to Mount Rainier, all the way up to Mount Baker, and everywhere in between is where I really kind of investigate, which is more northern east or northern west of Washington. But there's no, for me, it's like whenever there's access to the area, like, because a lot of the areas I go are fairly remote. So, you got to deal with the snow. And so there's limited access to that. But yeah, there's some really good areas that I've kind of dialed in that we're going to investigate a lot further this year in ways that we've never done before. And I'm excited for that opportunity to see if we can kind of figure out if there is something going on out there, and maybe there is, and maybe I'll get lucky and see one. If I can see one, man, I'll be a happy person. I would be like,
cool.
Man.
Tell me, how far away does Steve live from you?
I'd probably say about, depending on traffic, probably about an hour or so.
And wow, that's pretty close. What about Jay? How far away from you are from Jay?
5 hours.
5
Well,
hours.
here's the thing. It's 3 hours, 3.5 hours if you go in the middle of the night. But if you go anytime during the daylight, it's at least 5 hours, because of all the traffic that you have to go through between here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane with the traffic. So yeah, it's about 5 hours with that. We're actually going to go back down there here probably soon to do another investigation down there, because I just released a video of when I was down there where me and this other guy was doing a night walk, and we heard something moving out in the woods, and then all of a sudden this sounded like a big tree falling over. It sounded like something hit the tree, and the tree fell over. So don't know what that was. I'm not saying it was Bigfoot. It was just an experience that we had happen out there where Jay said he saw his Bigfoots at. So yeah, about 5 hours there.
Tell me something. Have you ever been to BC? If no, why the hell not?
Yeah, I've been up there once. I was really surprised to see that you guys have like, gosh, what did you guys call it? It's like well blubber and I don't know. It's like a really interesting dish that was like, wow, that's wild. But yeah, only once. I really would love to go up there this year, especially see Leon, come up see you guys, and maybe we do an investigation out there. Steve Pierce could to come up, and that would be an amazing time.
Leon's about a 3-hour drive from where I'm sitting right now. And I think he's going to be available all summer for some reason.
And I think the border's opening up on April 1st. Yeah. So
you had to drag Steve along with you and pay him.
Yeah, his wife too, because his wife's really great to have out there. She's really smart and a really good companion to have out there with him, because she's really good with animals and stuff. So we're gonna drag her along too, probably another person, because yeah, man, that'd be great to come up see you guys, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, we got to network. That's the word I was looking for. We have to network.
And then if you guys ever come down to the States, like Mount Baker area, I know Thomas is a big fan of that area. I know a lot of good areas that are high probability areas where Bigfoot exists. Maybe they're there, because we've had experiences that we can't properly vet out yet.
That is très cool. Yeah, definitely. Gentlemen, we're coming up to the 2nd hour mark. I think we got to pull the plug on this sooner or later. And I know time goes so fast, man. We got a really fantastic guest here, and the conversation is just flowing. But someone's got to pay the bills, and that's me. So I can't push her much further than this. So I want to thank you very much, Brent, for, making an appearance here, And thank you, Bill, for joining in, and you as well, Thomas. And
yeah, well, I want to thank you guys for being who you are. Like especially you, Bill, man. Listening to you talk, it's like, wow, it's so refreshing. I wish you'd do more podcasts, and have your mindset be put out there a lot more too. Same with like Thomas and you too, Jerry. It's like, I appreciate you guys for being you, for being real, and for taking the crap that you took to get to this point, because people like me and people coming up really appreciate that, respect that, and help use you guys as like a benchmark of where we can get to or where a good place is going. So I want to say thank you to all you guys. You guys are amazing and inspiring. So keep it up.
Wow. You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Don't know what to say for a change.
We're speechless. The next 3 minutes of silence are brought to you by our inactivity to reply to Prince.
I warn you, Brent, we're still going to find out who Cosmo is.
Oh, that's going to be the mystery of the summer. Who's Cosmo? He's probably going to be watching this right now, be like, ooh, this is good.
Just name themselves protectors of the guardians of the universe. Now, how many others are in their what did it call it? Seditious group. Yeah, time will tell. Brent, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, man. A lot of
Thank
trouble, tribulations getting to this point, but you got here, and we are so glad that you came, man. You are a refreshing voice to listen to. When I go to these other channels and everything, I always, sort of lean towards what's Brent got to say about this? What's Brent got to say about this?
Well, it's inspired from you guys, from how you guys roll. It's inspired from there. So
You're going to have to come back again, of course. That
absolutely.
goes without saying. And we all
With
have
Cosmo.
Yeah, I can pull that off. I can pull that off.
Ellie, bring a picture of Cosmo. So
Well, you can see him in the videos because he's actually the person who I highlight in a lot of my videos. So you'll see.
Don't give it away. We got to have a mystery here.
Don't give away.
All those videos are now private.
First it was Sasquatch, now it's Cosmo.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Love you all as usual. And we'll get together and do it again in a couple of weeks. And hey, Brent, God bless, man. Keep up the work. You are a breath of fresh air in all of this. And I'll say, hope you guys had a good time here today watching this, because we had a good time creating it and producing it for you. And Leon, we're thinking about you, bud.
Yes,
Get
we are.
well soon, please. Please get well soon. And I'm not political, but God bless Ukraine. Hang in there, guys.
Yes.
You want to see what it's like to have a pair of balls? You look at that country. You look at that country. Okay, everyone. God bless and have a great day.